Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Back at it with yet another video, and today we're taking a look at Saturn's retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell button below so that way you know when I'm on. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Now, just as a heads up for you guys, just to give you like the dates and the rundown and everything off the top of the video, this will not be happening until September 1st, 2025. So you guys have a couple more days of Saturn in Aries, but Saturn is still sitting at that critical 0-degree point. Now that's important because we will see in February of next year a conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, which is a very rare and unusual conjunction at the very first degree of the Zodiac. So I see this as kind of like the starting point and the finish line. Doesn't matter where Aries is in your chart, it's going to be ushering in a brand new energy, all about your goals, your vision, and also a little bit more about kind of finding the confidence to initiate and start something new. So you're going to have a couple days before we see Saturn retrograde back into Pisces, and it will be turning direct actually on November 27th, 2025. So a couple of months of having Saturn in Pisces, it'll go direct, and then we are going to see it actually stay in the sign of Pisces until February 13th, 2026. Now, if you have any personal planets between 24 to 29 degrees of Pisces, sun, moon, rising, maybe a node, this is going to be pretty significant for you guys because you're under a once in a 29-year period Saturn transit. So it's very personal for my Pisces placements. Quite honestly, you are just kind of doing a review of some of the things that you have been working on since last year. Now, this will also be impacting anybody who is a mutable or immutable rising sign from about 24 to 29 degrees. So that means my Geminis, my Virgos, my Saggies, all of you guys are going to be either under a square or an opposition, and you are wrapping up maybe this period over the last couple of months of feeling like there has been delays, there's been starts, there's been stops, and maybe in the sign of Pisces, you've had to kind of wrap things up or get closure, or maybe there's been some confusion. So we're kind of finish that up over the next couple of months. So those of you guys who are ruled by Saturn, like my Capricorn and my Aquarius risings, you guys are going to be feeling this as well as your chart ruler is retrograde back into a new sign. But think of it as kind of playing backtrack, kind of trying to wrap something up in the Pisces area of your chart before we get into the beginning of next year. Now, I'm going to show all of this to you guys so you can kind of see later in the video where Saturn is retrograding back. I'm going to give you some tips and some tricks. But I think this is a really important time to kind of talk about this, not only because Saturn's going to be sitting at critical degrees, but as we're getting into the month of September, we are actually going to be seeing eclipses that are going to be taking place in the Virgo and Pisces axis. So this is a very sensitive point. This is kind of like wrapping something up, but at the end of the month of September, around the 21st, we're going to see a solar eclipse in Virgo, and that solar eclipse is at 29 degrees. So it's going to be in opposition to where Saturn is kind of passing through. So we will see a couple of dings that are going to kind of come up, reactivating that eclipse. We are also going to be seeing that there is a Pisces lunar eclipse taking place on September the 7th. Now, it's not conjunct this degree, but it is a part of the eclipses that are connected to the Saturn in Pisces kind of karmic theme. Obviously, the North Node is there as well. So I just wanted to let you guys know that if you want to know more about how the eclipses are kind of tied to maybe the Saturn transit, if you want more insight on what to expect, including predictions for the 12 rising signs tarot, and an in-depth dive for my predictions for the fall eclipse season, definitely check out my fall 2025 eclipse webinar. It's over 3 hours long. There's a link in the description. We'll probably post it in the comments below if you guys want to check that out. It's for sale on my website, and I do cover both the lunar eclipse in Pisces and the solar eclipse in Virgo. I have not done a video on the solar eclipse in Virgo yet. It's going to be a couple weeks before we put that out on my channel. But you guys can see this in the webinar, or you can join my level 4 memberships on YouTube. Support me as a full-time content creator. You're going to get a reading during one of my live monthlies that I do on Fridays. And you guys can get a reading, and also you can see what's going on with the eclipse cycle. So check out the links below for that. All right, so let's get into Saturn and Pisces. Part of me is like, okay, we've gone through it once before, we can do it again. And it's been kind of unusual because we've seen Saturn kind of sitting at that 29 degrees with Neptune. So personally, it has felt to me like the most draining, the most emotional, the most sensitive, the most confusing, and just kind of like downright like clown world. I feel like there's just so many emotions and a lot of people who are feeling like things are getting kind of stirred and kicked up. So we can make it through it. We can deal with the retrograde. It's all in preparation for the brand new beginnings that are going to be coming next year. But truth be told, this month is pretty potent. I think that this is a retrograde that is really about a time of deep reflection. It's also about karmic closures and obviously emotional restructuring. When we see Saturn retrograde, things are breaking down and they're kind of dissolving in the sign of Pisces. So time doesn't feel real. We don't know exactly, how to get closure or how to have faith, or, maybe we feel a little restless and we're having trouble sleeping. But this is going to be something that I think is really important, that we kind of have to dissolve things, any kind of false faith or false beliefs, or maybe victimhood mentality, or, all these kind of self-undoing habits that kind of come from Pisces. And we're getting kind of slimed by what's going on in the collective. So we're going to have to work extra hard when it comes to kind of clearing our auric field, making sure we're grounded, being mindful of what we're kind of absorbing from other people. That includes what we're listening to, what we're watching, what we're believing in. And really, this is trying to, I think, kind of test our faith. This is really, really about testing our faith. So we will see this continue, this retrograde continue until about November 27th. And at that point in time, Saturn will go direct, and then it will keep moving through Pisces all the way until February of next year. Now, specifically, that 24 to 29 degrees of Pisces is being activated, and it's strongly going to be impacting anybody who's got planets around those degrees and the mutable signs. So something to kind of think about is like pull out your chart, take a look. Do you have anything that's within that 23, 24 to 29 degrees of the mutable signs or Pisces? We're going to unpack what all of this means and also how to kind of navigate this time. I'm optimistic because at least this time around, now that Saturn is dipping back into Pisces, we are going to see that Jupiter is going to be the dispositor, which obviously is in Cancer. It's exalted here. And in the fall, we're gonna receive some support because Jupiter is going to be kind of in harmonious aspect with the North Node in Pisces, helping us kind of grow and feel our way into change. Saturn and Jupiter will slightly trine in the fall as well, which I feel like is going to give us that sense of stability and reworking the foundation and also letting things go for kind of better, healthier, happier emotions and some really big changes that can be happening on the home front and with our family. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, as for what Saturn retrograde means, basically, Saturn is the taskmaster. This is the planet that's traditionally associated with Capricorn, which can be about responsibility, it can be about government, it can be about legacy, our careers, our kind of long-term goals. And Saturn does deal with long-standing tradition, elders in society, leaders in society. And obviously when Saturn's retrograde, we don't really see that there is an adult in the room. There is a sense of kind of feeling like, okay, the pressure is off, but who's in charge here? That's what I found myself saying a lot over the last year or so with Saturn and Neptune. Who's in charge here, or what's going on? Where is the structure? Where is the form? And I think that for the most part, during this retrograde, it's going to at least give us the opportunity to really turn within. Retrogrades are more eternal. We see that things are kind of slow. It's hard to kind of figure our way forward. And in the sign of Pisces, I think it can be excellent for lots of internal reflection. It can also be an amazing period for reviewing or revising and reevaluating the structures and also the responsibilities and the boundaries that we have been building over the last 2 years while Saturn has been in Pisces. So instead of this outward progress that we like to see with Saturn direct, we're actually going to be turning within and we're going to be fixing what's been broken. Maybe we're releasing outdated commitments, or maybe we're finally confronting something that's very karmic. Obviously, the North Node is in Pisces as well. It will not make aspects to the North Node, but we will see that it's bringing up the themes of, hey, we must kind of conclude this or dissolve this or release it. And it's part of our obligation karmically as a collective before we move forward. So for some of us, it's going to kind of feel like it's a call to fix what's been broken. I think it's really about, new starts, that will come in the future. When Saturn is retrograde, now is not the time to initiate or start something new. It's about kind of wrapping up these loose ends wherever Pisces is in your chart and learning from the past limitations that we have been experiencing. And I think for many of us, it's also been about where there's been illusions or confusion or manipulation, or where we haven't been seeing things so clearly. So in this case, Saturn retrograde in Pisces will really amplify introspection. And I think that the themes of surrender and also, like disillusion, because we need to do that in order to kind of step into some of the new phases that are going to come at the beginning of 2026. Now, Pisces in a nutshell, 12th sign of the zodiac, mutable, water, traditionally ruled by Jupiter. It's more the expansive kind of feminine energy connected to Jupiter. It is about a ton of things, which I'll get into in a second, but it is about releasing, surrendering, and letting go. And when I think about Pisces, I think about that traditional rulership with Jupiter and the modern day rulership with Neptune. So it's interesting to see that throughout this retrograde, there will be aspects from both planets. Both Jupiter, exalted in Cancer, will trine. We're also going to see Neptune retrograde back into Pisces for a short period of time. And this is a sign that's really about embodying spirituality, themes like empathy, intuition, creativity, as well as the collective unconscious. So dreams can be wild, guys. I'm already kind of starting to notice them over the last couple of days. But I also feel like this can be a time where on the shadow side, we can see that there can be themes coming up that are connected to escapism, confusion, victimhood, addictions, as well as the blurred boundaries that we are all kind of experiencing on the day-to-day. Overall, Pisces really teaches us that it's about kind of being in flow with life's currents, and that this is about embracing oneness and kind of healing through compassion. With the North Node being there in aspect to Jupiter, I think this is definitely a big theme. But the catch here with Saturn and Neptune is not finding yourself in a situation where you lack boundaries, because it really warns against losing ourselves in illusions or kind of like avoiding the reality of the situation. Now, Saturn represents the planet of discipline. This is connected to structure, karma, limitations, time even. And really what Saturn wants to do in any sign is it wants to really build foundation and enforce some sort of responsibility. And Saturn does reward hard work, with long-term stability. So this is a wonderful time to be thinking about what chapters you're wrapping up in terms of responsibility and commitment, how much time you're dedicating to the Pisces area of your chart. And in transit, Saturn really wants to test our maturity and endurance. And Saturn's known for bringing delays and restrictions to teach these lessons. So you might feel like you're kind of aggravated this month because the eclipses are kind of kicking up, aspects to Saturn. Saturn's retrograding back into Pisces with the North Node. And there are some things that you're like, oh, I thought I learned that lesson. I thought I completed this. I thought I was done with this. And now clearly you have to go back because there's something else that we kind of have to finish up. And when in Pisces, Saturn really grounds the sign's more dreamy energy. So it can kind of bring it back down to earth, and it can make it more practical. And really what it's asking us to do is to really restructure something when it comes to our spirituality or our belief system, and really set boundaries and do it in a compassionate manner, and face some of the karmic debts in emotional or kind of like imaginative realms. Now, the third decan of Pisces is where Saturn is going to be sitting. So it's going to be between 24 and 29 degrees. And this is where Saturn will retrograde back to. And this is a decan that is, in traditional decan systems, connected to Mars. So it has a very kind of Scorpio-like intensity to it. And it also means that there can be spiritual warfare going on. There can be hidden wars. There can be things going on with the Navy. There could be conflict going on in our dreams. Some of us might have more nightmares. We might notice that there's just more kind of repressed anger or frustration and things that are kind of coming up for us collectively. The positive is that, this decan does add passion. It adds transformation and some resilience to some of like the Pisces softness. And it's about deep emotional purging and facing hidden fears and kind of alchemizing them and that suffering into something that can actually be strength. So it's going to kind of help fortify through the Saturn transit. I think really, if we look at the transit overall, it intensifies some of the themes of karmic closure. So some of us might feel like we have to do cord cutting, cutting ties, detaching from things. And it's definitely going to make this retrograde period feel a little underwater. And this is about kind of releasing buried traumas or illusions and kind of purging it or detoxifying it out of our systems. So cleanses, soaks, saunas, hot water, tea and herbs, these things can be really beneficial. And I think for a lot of people, this is going to actually manifest because Saturn and Neptune have been in Aries, which is a Martian sign, as a lot of people needing to confront addictive patterns or some kind of tendency to spiritually bypass. And we're going to be doing this more with like a kind of Martian-like discipline. Now, Jupiter is the traditional ruler here. So Jupiter is interesting because of the trines and the fact that it's going to be the dispositor of both Saturn and Neptune going back into Pisces. And this is beneficial for a number of reasons. I think the exaltation is great. The Jupiter trine is going to soften some of the heaviness of Saturn. Obviously, these are in water signs, so it can be very intuitive and very therapeutic. And Jupiter is going to be hanging out between 19 and about 22 degrees of Cancer while it's kind of making this trine. We'll actually see Jupiter get up to maybe like 24 degrees, I think, in the fall. I'll check in a second. But during this particular period, you're going to see that there will be a trine between Saturn retrograde and Pisces, and you're going to see a trine to Jupiter in Cancer. So this is creating a harmonious flow of expansion and nurturing. Jupiter is going to be emphasizing emotional security in Cancer, and this is going to be topics like family or intuitive growth, and this will soften more of the kind of restrictive nature of Saturn with abundance, emotions, joy, and protection. Now, this tells me that you have to be willing to get a little bit firmer with your boundaries in order to protect the things that you love and you value or cherish the most. And it's going to kind of show us where there is a wealth of growth and abundance that can come from the Cancer area of life, as long as we're being a little bit more strict and kind of towing the line when it comes to some of the boundaries with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, which is easier said than done. I do think the positive of this is that this aspect is really kind of like a cosmic blessing, and it's going to be obviously in the midst of the Saturn retrograde intensity, but it'll bring opportunities for healing family karma, intuitive insights into limitations, and obviously closures that can be a little bit softer and a little bit more compassionate. So what it's going to do is it's going to kind of turn a potential hardship with Saturn retrograde into some kind of growth. So I see this as, emotional support networks or spiritual mentors, appearing to kind of, guide you through some of these boundaries, where a meditation practice can be really helpful, or where doing some soul searching and some ancestral healing can help you break some of these patterns that we've been carrying for generations. Now, this transit is a very big karmic closure for the collective, okay? Because the North Node's in Pisces, that's the kind of the collective, all of us together, all of our souls on this planet. And it's also connected to, completions for many of us as well. And this all has to happen prior to February 2026 Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. So we have to learn this lesson. We have to get this right. We have to do it over the next couple of months. And I see this as a period of like a final review phase before Saturn leaves for good in 2026. And it won't come back to Pisces for like another 29 years. So we're wrapping up lessons from 2023 to 2025's Pisces transit. And because Pisces rules collective karma and, dissolution, spiritual debt, this Saturn retrograde is really forcing some kind of global and personal reckoning. So we're all going to be releasing cycles of maybe suffering, illusion, as well as escapism as we're building into the Saturn-Neptune conjunction next year at 0 degrees of Aries on February the 20th. So this will be a very rare conjunction. That conjunction alone, Saturn-Neptune, only happens about every 36 years or so. But this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries has not happened for a very long time at 0 degrees for a very long time. And this is kind of kicking off a new beginning for, I think, humankind. Now, I think that this retrograde is really kind of asking us that to structure our dreams, to take kind of, awareness of where we're being a little too idealistic. And it's preparing us for kind of completing this karmic business, like healing collective trauma, so we can kind of enter into 2026 with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction renewed and have a sense of confidence, have a sense of, bravery, willingly to kind of take action, to be independent and kind of break out of this self-imposed prison, right? Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is like where we have been sheltered or where we have felt limited or where we have been doubting ourselves in many ways. Now, Neptune is about to retrograde back into Pisces as well. I'll do a separate video on that. But starting around October 22nd, 2025, Neptune will retrograde and it will re-enter into Pisces from Aries. So this is going to be an intensified period until about the end of March of 2026. Now, Neptune also is ruling kind of Pisces. It's the modern day ruler, and this will be amplifying the illusion, spirituality, as well as empathy. But since it's going to be retrograde, it can also dissolve boundaries further, and this can lead to confusion as well as major revelations in the Pisces area of your chart. I think combining Saturn and Neptune retrograde in this sign is just a double dose of Piscean review. Saturn structures Neptune's dreams, and this is really helping ground fantasies into reality. But this has also been a lot of where there's been too much understanding, too much compassion to the point where it's actually flooding people with feeling overwhelmed or feeling scared or worried. We've seen lots of conflict revolving around, religious, differences, cultural differences, and where that kind of blending of certain belief systems has actually created some issues for the collective because there's been lack of boundaries or lack of government or leadership or control. So I think that for many of us, this can be beneficial because now we're starting to kind of wake up to, wait a second, this is actually not stable, or this is not a solid belief, or this is not actually really good leadership. And I think people are going to start to kind of wake up to that. And they're also going to see through some of the other Pisces themes, like Pisces is screens, it's videos, it's television shows, it's movies, and where there's been like a lot of like propaganda and things that have been kind of coming up, trying to kind of influence people's subconscious. Now, I think to like best work with this particular transit, embrace introspection. So whether that's going for a walk on your own, if that is having a regular meditation practice, maybe it's some kind of physical activity you're doing by yourself, or journaling and reflecting on your boundaries, especially when it comes to empathy or spirituality, that can be really beneficial. Set realistic goals for emotional healing. So, I guess like assistance, like therapy or meditation can be really beneficial because this is about kind of getting into the subconscious and figuring out what's going on and how to break through some of the limitations that we have been having or some of the fears that we've been having. I would also really recommend working with water. So, being in water, soaks, saunas, ocean walks, all of these things can be really beneficial just to kind of get into the flow of like that Saturn and Pisces energy. And use affirmations that are going to be things like, I release what no longer serves me with grace. And obviously, seek support from like a wise elder or mentor, because Saturn and Neptune can be about kind of the elders that we have in spiritual or religious kind of groups or in society that can kind of show us the way. And I think that's also going to be the connection to the Jupiter influence that's coming through the trines as well. Particularly older family members, ancestors, kind of reflecting on our roots can be really beneficial. And we want to focus on completions. We want to focus on kind of tying up some of these loose ends and finishing projects tied to the Pisces themes. So you're going to want to look at which house Pisces is in. This is where you're kind of going through and you're doing a lot of this work, especially in the month of September with the eclipses and the Saturn retrograde. Now, what do you want to watch out for, I guess, is the question. Well, Saturn retrograde does bring delays, but it also brings a little bit more ease. So the positive is we can ease back into the Pisces area of our chart. We can do some of those things or get right back into it, and it doesn't feel as challenging or as hard. The downside of this is that if we are leaning too much into the ease and we're not taking it seriously, or we're not wrapping some of this stuff up, and we're kind of going to sleep, or we're just kind of overlooking what we need to get done, then it can kind of come back to kind of bite us in the backside. So we want to take note of where we need to kind of wrap some of that stuff up, even if we are experiencing some delays or some frustrations, or we're seeing that there is some resurfacing restrictions. And we want to make sure that we're avoiding escapism, okay? So like kind of tuning out is very Pisces. So whether that's drinking, drugging, oversleeping, isolating, and we're in denial to some kind of extent about that there is a lack of boundaries in that particular area, especially because Pisces really amplifies any issues with addiction. So those of us who are like in a period of sobriety, or we're trying to cut back from, isolating, or we're trying to cut back from, recreational like drug use or anything like that, this is a time that you want to make sure that you're staying on top of it and you're not just checking out and like leaning on substances to kind of deal with what's going on in the world. Watch for boundary breaches or victim mentality. Obviously, the Jupiter trine, it does help, but we don't want to overly kind of rely on luck. And remember that structure is key. Now, health-wise, we want to monitor our feet because Pisces is connected to feet, as well as the immune system. And I think this is really important going into what we will see with, Pisces, the Pisces eclipse and also the Virgo solar eclipse. So if you guys look at this, it'll be on the 1st that Saturn is back and it's sitting at that 29 degrees. But what's interesting is if you look at the eclipses, which I already did one of the videos on the lunar eclipse, so check that out if you haven't seen it. We have the lunar eclipse on the 7th that is going to be at 15 degrees, so it's conjunct the North Node, and then the next day it's going to conjunct Saturn. So we're going to see something within like 72 hours of this eclipse that's very much tied to the Saturn and Pisces themes. Now, previously, when we've had Saturn at these kind of later degrees, we've seen a lot of water events. We have seen flooding. We have seen issues with coastal cities. We have seen massive storms. We have also seen lots of scandals and things that have been coming up. Obviously, 29 degrees is a Leo degree, so it does deal with hidden secret things going on with leaders, whether it's secret peace discussions or it's going to be about dissolving certain global relationships or exposing certain conspiracies. And things that are more Neptunian, which can be hidden, and it also can be stuff that was kind of swept under the rug. Now, I do think that in terms of like the health stuff, obviously, the Pisces lunar eclipse is opposing the Sun and Mercury in Virgo. So there's going to be lots of talk in September globally about health, okay? And this is where the moon is kind of highlighting and demystifying and kind of starting to show some of the information pertaining to health or systems or public health or anything connecting to diet or food, things that we buy and consume. Virgo can be anything connecting to, wheat and bringing in grains and everything connecting to our crops and how we are treating them to what's going into food and what we're consuming and what we've learned about food. So as I film this, something that was just recently coming out about RFK and some of like the new health regulations, he's now reinstituting in medicine and medical school for students that now if you're going to become a doctor, you have to learn about nutrition and you're having to learn about accurate kind of information about nutrition and how to properly instruct your patients how to eat and how to get to the root cause of health issues. And it's kind of getting away from becoming more reliant on pharmaceuticals. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about that in September and October as a result of the eclipses. And then you'll see, like I said, about a day later, the moon's going to start coming into conjunction with Saturn. So watch what's happening on the 28th of September, the day after, when the moon makes that conjunction, because this is the Leo degree. So there's going to be maybe, the end of a phase of a leader kind of like ruling. Maybe there's going to be some kind of global, kind of limitation from, if you believe in this like global order that's kind of influencing politics or influencing, countries all over, it's now breaking down because Saturn is kind of like shifting. And we're also going to see the solar eclipse that's going to be in Virgo, which I have affectionately said is not my favorite. Not my favorite eclipse. Definitely, I think one of the more difficult eclipses all year at 29 degrees. Okay, and that is an eclipse that opposes Saturn. So not only does the Pisces eclipse have Saturn at 29 degrees, but then we have a solar eclipse, which is going to be much more action-packed, unlike the lunar eclipse, which is more emotional. And this is new starts and new information with Mercury and Libra, supporting people and giving people information about where maybe we have been led astray when it comes to health and wellness over the last couple of years. That's all I'm going to say about that. And also, I think lots of news and information pertaining to new laws, especially because Jupiter deals with laws and Jupiter is slightly trining and also sextiling these eclipses. And if you look at this, Mercury is going to trine Uranus and it's going to trine Pluto. So whatever new news or information throughout this eclipse cycle, which could take 6 to 12 months, will definitely impact the rule of law when it comes to health care, information. That could mean packaging inserts, what doctors have to tell patients, new data and information that's kind of now coming out. And I think it's going to influence a lot of people's decisions about whether or not they feel like they can trust leadership. Now they're going to go, well, Saturn retrograde, where was the leadership? Why did we not know? Or why did we not listen to doctors? Or why did we not get the information that we need? I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating. But I do think that there's definitely a lot of legal stuff going on, especially with that Mars being at 29 degrees, kind of disrupting the scales, and it's opposing Chiron. So this is going to open the floodgates for a lot of people to kind of find out a lot about what we did not know. Now, remember, Saturn is in Pisces, so it's not just about healthcare, it's about hospitals. It's going to be also about private healthcare centers. It's going to be about global health concerns and the impact it has on the immune system, Pisces. Things connecting to water as well. So the quality of water, what's in the water, what's going on with tap water, what's happening with our rivers or oceans, and what's kind of being put into the water supply and how things are being cleaned, cleansed, processed. I'm really focused on that because that's really what Virgo is all about. And this is obviously a new moon that's trining Pluto. So I think it's going to be a lot about like water and sanitation and finding out about just exactly what is in some of our local water supplies. And I do have concerns for a solar eclipse in Virgo for, health. I think that this could definitely be a turning point where a lot of people are going to be more particular about what food they're eating, personal hygiene, Virgo, where they're getting their food, where they're sourcing it from. And I think that now this is going to be lots of challenges and restrictions. So there's definitely going to be lots of changes to the laws regarding what can and cannot be put in the food, what is being removed, who has access also to, state assistance and programs like WIC and food stamps and things like that. And yeah, you are going to see some people that are going to kind of be like, whoa, what's going on? Like, why am I not getting the support or the help that I need? Versus there's going to be other people who have been kind of, living off the system who are going to start to go like, well, I'm not being helped anymore. I need help. Virgo is going to be about jobs. So this is why you're going to see probably a pretty massive cut in government jobs. We're also going to see some layoffs as well. And obviously this is a slowing down or a breaking down of what could be the global economy. So if there is going to be certain things that are being removed or not being supported or not being pushed through by government, like certain foods, certain pharmaceuticals, certain regulations and laws, we're going to see certain industries that are going to kind of start to break down. And you will see that slowly over about a 6 to 12 month period. Now, in terms of my predictions for this Saturn retrograde, I think one is just collectively, I'm watching ocean events. I've seen enough of these Pisces transits to know that we see things like bridges, collapse into water. We see issues with boats hitting, walls or hitting, docks. We've seen issues pertaining to flooding. We've also seen, weird kind of things going on revolving around ocean activity. So I'll be watching that stuff. I wonder if there's going to be more floods. Traditionally, the late degrees of Pisces is associated with that. We do see unusual rain and flooding. And we also see marine policies that may potentially shift because Pisces is water and Saturn is going to be structure. So we might see themes revolving around who has access to what, protecting or, trying to clean up certain habitats or, places around the world where we're trying to kind of clean the water. And also Saturn here is going to deal with limitations, restrictions, and issues revolving around oil and gas industries. So I'm thinking particularly about international trade with oil and gas, certain places that might be not allowing the passage of ships, and we can start to see some increased prices that can happen with oil and gas as well. There could be like a breakdown or a limitation, which could cause some panic. And we can also see price fluctuations and regulations revolving around that. Pisces also deals with those who are lost or wanderers. So we're going to see, I think with Saturn retrograde in Pisces and trines to Jupiter, we're going to see that homelessness is going to be a huge topic. In some places, homelessness will surge due to the trine to Jupiter, but in other places, the Saturn retrograde and then Saturn going direct is going to be about support for people who are homeless. And this could mean that there's psychological support, there's rehab, there's going to be centers and places where we're going to be protecting them, and it's going to be definitely a surge of like more compassionate reforms regarding homelessness And I think that Jupiter trine is going to definitely aid humanitarian aid. So we could see that there's going to be new communities or building initiatives or, spaces and places where we're creating communities and we're integrating people who feel like they're lost or they don't have some kind of support back into society. Now, I think for the global economy, we're going to see some leadership crisis, and a lot of that's going to because there's been some leaders or there's been some prime ministers or presidents or people who have basically been too sympathetic and too understanding about what's going on in the world. They've been too, I think, lenient when it comes to crime. They've been too lenient with allowing some people to kind of like evade, having to do jail time, or maybe they have, been set free for, horrible crimes as a result of Pisces. So there's a huge ongoing thing where we're seeing some, leaders that are like, well, if you're immigrant or, if you're of a certain nationality or religion or background or what have you, you're not going to have to do the same kind of time that a local citizen would do for the same crime. This is happening all over the world. This is not me being, confrontational. I mean, this is real. Now the karmic blowback is going to happen. So if there has been too much leniency in immigration, too much understanding with just letting people in, and this like fusion and merger of cultures that don't mix, what we're going to start to see is that, hopefully there is going to be a reevaluation of what's happened, and the Jupiter trine is going to bring in new economic policies that's protecting citizens, that's protecting the culture and the values of that particular country. And Jupiter in Cancer, it's funny. It's like you guys saw like that. I think it was like the big jean commercial. I don't know if it was Levi's or what it was, and everybody made a big deal about it. But Jupiter in Cancer is about our genealogy. It's our culture, our roots, where we come from. So every time we see Jupiter in Cancer, we always see these themes that's going to revolve around my heritage, my family, my genetics. Well, Jupiter trining Saturn and Neptune may very well actually be kind of getting back down to brass tacks when it comes to what specific cultures and countries believe in. And so they're going to be kind of reviewing the history. They're going to be restructuring things. On a whole other side of this, I also feel like this is also going to be with Saturn retrograde in Pisces, reviewing history and the things that have been left out of the textbooks, the things that we have not known. There could definitely be a lot of reviewing and going over the history of certain countries and structuring or restructuring how we're telling history and realistically what was fact from fiction, and a lot of people learning a lot more about their culture and their roots or where they come from. So I think that may potentially play a huge role, especially in education or, in primary school or even in colleges. Now, in terms of immigration and borders, there's been a lot of fluidity in terms of policies, whether that's for people who are immigrating or people who are seeking asylum or, people who are illegally crossing into countries. I think that Saturn retrograde now, we're going to see a lot more focus on what's going on with border security, what's going on with, people who are going to be immigrants or seeking asylum. We might see that there is a slowing down effect of people trying to kind of move or change countries or feeling that it's more difficult or challenging to actually get into new places. But we can also see that with Saturn kind of enforcing new structures in the fall and, the aspects to Jupiter, we can see waves of refugees and kind of border realignments that can be happening in certain places. As for Pisces and mental health, I think this is going to be heightened awareness of mental health issues. And in particular, I think of, veterans, I think of those who are disabled, those who are older, those who are homeless. We're going to see a lot of these people that are going to be the huge focus with some of the Saturn retrograde. And I really feel like it's going to be really exposing some of the systemic failures where we have failed to actually protect and take care of some of these people. And now this is the karmic reckoning. So, around the world, but I'm an American. So here in the United States, you see certain places where there is just, homeless encampments and tons of people who are addicted and need help and clearly don't have a lot of support. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more initiatives around the United States to support some of these individuals, especially with the trine to Jupiter, and provide security in home and also some kind of care. And I also feel like this can be kind of getting more community involved in some of these actions. Now, you can't talk about Pisces without talking about spirituality or religion. I guess one thing I will say is that there can be major scandals that can happen in institutions or a karmic reckoning for organized religions. But the trine is really fostering, faith movements. And I think a lot of this can be some people going back or returning to church or to scripture, or they're returning to, their religious beliefs or their spiritual practice. They're returning back to meditating. So if you're somebody who's gotten out of your meditative routine, I've kind of laughed recently. Somebody was asking me the other day, I have a client who's a friend of mine she's a hypnotherapist, and she's like, what's going on? Like, I'm not seeing as much like traction, or I'm just noticing that there's not a lot of retention going on with clients. And I'm like, well, Saturn and Neptune went into Aries. I was like, everybody's white knuckling life right now. I'm like, people are not, they're just trying to get through it, head on, and they're going to hit walls. And I said, as soon as Saturn goes back into Pisces and Neptune's back into Pisces this fall, you will see people that are going to realize that they have to go back to that. So we might see a lot more people meditating, going to church, going to spiritual practice, focusing on their own kind of spiritual consciousness, and needing a little bit more alone time to kind of integrate. Now, I think some other things that are worthy of mentioning, maybe not as big, but we can see some, some booms or some changes going on when it comes to art and music or film. So we can definitely see some big changes revolving around the film industry, especially when I think about this solar eclipse in opposition to Saturn, jobs in the industry, people who are involved in the unions, certainly gig workers and stuff is very like Virgo. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some big changes going on with scheduling and things connecting to movies and media. We're certainly seeing a lot of that happening with news media, but I think we're going to see some more with some of the bigger studios. And we're also potentially going to see some major pharmaceutical advancements, or some awareness or awakening, I guess I should say, to the reality of some of the limited or hidden kind of factors that are kind of connected to some of these drugs. And so we've been seeing it recently with things like Ozempic, but I think we're going to hear more about stuff kind of connected to the V word and other pharmaceuticals, and the impact that that's actually having on our digestion, our gut, anything revolving around also nutrition and stuff that's connecting to older generation. Saturn is going to be elders. So I'm wondering, well, are we going to hear more about the truth of certain foods that, have certain additives that is contributing to Alzheimer's, right? Are we going to be hearing about all these foods that are very much lacking certain nutrients that's perpetuating aging? Are we going to be hearing more about certain things that we have been told that's beneficial for our immune system, when in reality it's weakening it, making us much more of a prime candidate to be somebody who's going to need to be buying or taking certain medications, and just kind of continuing that perpetual loop. That's my belief looking at the astrology personally. And I think that we will also possibly hear more revolving around prison reforms with Saturn retrograde. That can be a theme. Prisoners, things kind of connected to getting more insight and awareness to kind of what's going on with the prison systems, and maybe some changes revolving around laws connecting to that particular industry. So that's my hot take for what's going to be happening with this Saturn retrograde. Obviously, it's going to be the most potent September 1st, I would say, until about the end of September. So it's going to sit at 29 degrees. It looks like until about September 14th, but it'll be at the late degrees until the end of September. So the first 2 weeks of September, Saturn's at 29. We've got a lunar eclipse, and we've got a solar eclipse that's going to be aspecting Saturn. And then it will continue to stay in this particular sign all the way until February. So it's going to go direct in November, and by then Saturn and Neptune are both in this sign. Neptune will sit at 29 as well. I'll make another video on that. And then they're both going to come into Aries, and it's going to be around the 20th of February, I believe, that Saturn and Neptune are going to conjunct at 0 degrees. So too long, didn't listen, don't blame you. You have basically September 1st until about mid-February. By the time we get to mid-February, Saturn's going to be swinging, into Aries with that conjunction, and it's going to hit Neptune. And that basically means now it's go time. Now we're starting something new. A lot of astrologers are talking about this conjunction. It's very significant. We have not seen this particular conjunction at these degrees since the Bronze Age. So there is going to be a whole new reckoning for humanity, and I'm working on some stuff for that for you guys in 2026. So I'm kind of starting to get those webinars and things together for you around the new year. Definitely head over to my website, beyondtheveiltarot.com. Sign up for my newsletter so that way you guys can see when I have those courses, and consider checking out my webinar on the eclipses. With that being said, let me show you guys where Saturn is retrograding back for the 12 rising signs, just to give you guys some insight in terms of what to expect. As a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology that I like to practice. So I do recommend listening to your rising sign, especially since Saturn's retrograding back into another house. Listen to your rising sign to see which house Saturn is retrograding through. And then you can also listen to your sun or your moon sign. It might apply for you, especially if you have like Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces in your big three. You definitely want to listen to your sun and your moon sign, because this is going to be the most prominent, I think, for Capricorn and Aquarius. You're ruled by Saturn. Pisces placements about, let's say, 23 to 29 degrees. And also mutable placements, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces. All of you guys are going to be feeling the effects of this Saturn transit. All right, so let's get into the 12 signs, and we're going to talk about the tips and tricks and what to expect with this retrograde. All right, so for my Aries and Aries risings, you guys get a little bit of a break. As an Aries moon, I cannot wait until Saturn leaves Aries, and it just started. So obviously in your chart, Saturn is connecting to your 10th house, which deals with your career, and your 11th house, which deals with groups, okay? So that's kind of what Saturn is connected to. But Saturn is retrograding out of your first house, going into your 12th house. So it's going into like your house that deals with the subconscious. It's about restrictions, resurfacing. This is also about kind of karmic isolation and dealing with hidden enemies. Now, you could be your own worst enemy. It could be friends you're kind of cutting out. It could be some work conflict that's going on. But this is your cocoon phase. So you are going into your cocoon phase to kind of prepare before you emerge in the new year, bigger, better, stronger, more independent, and I think more capable. So you're having to kind of believe in yourself. And I think that with the Saturn retrograde back in your 12th house, spiritual retreats or hospital matters can come up, okay? If you willingly use this time to do some type of isolation, practice, like meditating before bed or first thing in the morning, or maybe starting a spiritual or religious routine, or maybe you're just consciously taking time to just like integrate and chill, sleep more, rest more, right? Have some alone time, you will be fine. But this is about releasing burdens for inner peace. And it's like there is a need to do that. You might kind of feel like you have to kind of go into hermit mode a little bit. So I would recommend for you guys between now and February, now is a good time to meditate, but avoid escapism. Like there's a fine line between kind of checking out and like just taking time to yourself. And this is a good time to be really focusing on grounding with your routines behind the scenes. Good luck. All right, so we've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? You're going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde back into Pisces, which will be going through your natal 11th house. And Pisces is friendly with Taurus, especially if you're like a later degree Taurus. You'll be experiencing some sextiles, so Saturn is supporting you. But basically, you're going to be seeing, Saturn retrograde in the part of your chart that deals with friendships, networks, and goals. Now, Saturn is traditionally associated with your 9th house, which is about your beliefs, maybe travel, can also be about higher education, legal matters, publishing, and it also is connecting to your 10th house, which is all about your career, your legacy, your personal reputation. So as Saturn retrogrades back through your 11th house of social networks, they will be tested. Your goals will be tested. Your friendships will be tested. You will start to see where there can be some illusions that are coming up in friendships, and some of them will dissolve, but there can also be karmic connections with the right people to help you find your tribe. I do feel like group karma, is a theme, completions of group projects, maybe new alliances that will kind of come as a result of this transit as well. So for Taurus and Taurus risings, I would say I really recommend reevaluating some of your aspirations. What are your goals? What is it you want to do? What do you not want to do? Get those things in order. And do focus on networking mindfully, because certain groups and professional connections can provide a lot of support. Friends can also provide a lot of support, especially when it comes to your vision for what you're trying to build for your professional life. Okay? Good luck, Taurus. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising. You're going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde back into the sign of Pisces in your natal 10th house. So buckle up, Gemini, especially if you're like at, 23, 24 to 29 degrees. You're under a Saturn square. So I know this has been kind of testing you over the last year, and maybe there has been some challenges, some crisis of faith with your career, your purpose, some kind of delay in getting into your occupation, or maybe you just felt like work has just been never ending. But Saturn is connected to your 8th house of shared resources. So like, inheritance, taxes, investments, partners, money, bonuses, and the 9th house of beliefs. Okay. So as Saturn retrogrades in the 10th house, something to kind of think about is like, first of all, Saturn loves being in the 10th house. It may be challenging for you, but Saturn really likes being in this house. It's very beneficial to have Saturn here because this is one of his favorite houses. This is because Saturn's traditional association with Capricorn. So basically your career and your public image, you're working your way through some of the restrictions, and there can be some karmic professional closures. But I do predict for some of you guys that even though there's leadership tests, you may actually get recognition for a job well done after you have kind of gotten through this particular period. And you're going to find that many of you guys are going to make revisions at work. Your goal here is to really structure your ambition and manage the time, how much time you're spending at something, how much time you're giving something to kind of unfold, taking your time at work, and also maybe seeking mentors for some kind of like professional clarity. Some of you guys might be retiring, quitting jobs, starting new jobs, or realizing that it's time to go in a different direction as well. Good luck, Gemini. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. So you're getting a little bit of a break if you're an early Cancer rising. You've been experiencing the square. And Saturn will be retrograding through your 9th house and a fellow sister water sign. So if you're a later degree Cancer rising, like the last 5 to 7 degrees, it'll be trining you. And I think you'll also like this because you have a say now with Jupiter in your sign being the dispositor and trine of just where you go, what you do, what you learn, what you believe in. And it can be a very freeing kind of transit. So I think you guys are actually going to like this. Now, Saturn traditionally rules your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, and allies, as well as your 8th house of shared resources, intimacy, and other people. Now, as Saturn retrogrades in your 8th house, this is going to be about belief systems that are undergoing some kind of review. It can mean that your beliefs are challenged, and there could be illusions that you're cutting through revolving around travel, your belief system, higher education. Some of you guys might be contemplating, do I go back to school? Do I, go and get the degree? Do I publish the book? Some of you guys might travel and return back to a place that you've been before, but traveling and education can seem a little fuzzy with this transit. And I would say that a lot of this is about, karmic learning completions. So if you're finally wanting to finish your degree, you might realize that. And there can be a lot of intuitive expansions that can kind of happen with this transit as well. And mentors can come in to kind of guide you. I would advise a lot of you guys to really consider studying something that's connected to spirituality or something that's connected to health. I would also recommend that, you guys really, tap into a teacher, a mentor, a course, something that is going to provide you with some kind of insight. And I would be studying spirituality or something connecting to culture and releasing rigid views for necessary growth. Good luck. We got Leo and Leo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde back into the sign of Pisces in your natal 8th house, which is obviously going to be dealing with intimacy, shared resources, and karmic matters, joint matters, karmic entanglement, endings, beginnings, transformations. Now, Saturn is traditionally associated with your 6th house of health and habits, as well as your 7th house of partnerships and marriage. And we're going to see that Saturn is retrograde back into Pisces. So first of all, it's in a sign that inconjuncts or quincunxes you. So Saturn's kind of hidden here. So you don't always see the lessons as they're kind of coming or the changes as they're coming. And the lesson is going to be about intimacy and shared resources and where you can feel restricted, where you're not feeling the connection or you're not feeling the financial support. Certainly it's about tying up loose debt. So debts, loans, mortgages, karmic debts, finishing up a tax matter or an inheritance matter can kind of come up. Returning back to, therapy or working through a trauma and like how that impacts your health or your relationships can be a theme here as well. And I would say that I would predict for you guys that there can be closures when it comes to financials or trust related matters. Definitely an opportunity for transformative healing is something that I think that's very beneficial for you guys. And this is about setting boundaries in joint matters. Focusing on emotional security and like really learning how to be vulnerable and opening up to people so you can really change and transform the way that you view intimacy in relationships or even in finances. Certainly a lot of this is going to come up for you guys during the eclipses here as well. And I think that for the most part, it's almost like you have to really reevaluate what you have the courage to change or let go of. So as you go into your Saturn, transit next year, you're going to be feeling more adventurous, more independent, more capable. And I think that there could be a little bit of doubt as to whether or not you can make the jump or if you can afford the change. But the key here is to be brave and be willing to kind of welcome the changes as they come in. Okay? Good luck. All right, Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are in the hot zone. Saturn's retrograding back into Pisces in your opposite sign of the 7th house, which we know deals with relationships, partnerships, and marriage. Now, for you guys, Saturn is connecting to your 5th house, which deals with romance, creativity, joy, but also anything connected to children. And the 6th house, which is dealing with health, habits, care, and routine. So these topics are coming back up for reevaluation in your relationships. The 7th house is where we air stuff out. So it can really be different depending on what your relationship status is. I think just in general, Saturn in the 7th, partnerships get tested. We do see, illusions in relationships that become more clear or they dissolve. Partners can return. There can be a reevaluation of an existing relationship or marital partner. You could be making big decisions about settling down, getting married, getting divorced, having kids. And relationships with younger people or children can definitely be a theme here as well. I predict for many of you guys that the next month is going to be very telling because you're going to see where there are blockages happening in relationships as a result of you getting in your own way with the solar eclipse in your first, and where other people are going to be like, this needs to change in order for us to come together. Now, a Saturn retrograde in the 7th is great for connecting with an astrologer, getting a reading, connecting with a therapist, or finding like a coach or somebody who can kind of help you through some of these changes so you feel like you can find joy again, or you can figure out, whether or not a relationship is working for you. And I do think that while bonds will be tested, I think that balanced connections can actually start to thrive. And when Saturn leaves this house, he can leave a gift, and it can actually bring you a stronger union or a better partner. Now, if you've been trying to separate or divorce, it's probably been dragging out a little bit. There's been some negotiations over joint finances and money, and that's something you're still going to deal with throughout the retrograde. But for the most part, if you're communicating your needs and if you're, learning that there is a need to nurture other people and like tap into, what needs to be focused on in relationships or what you're willing to sacrifice in order to get into relationships, including, not settling, if that means, letting somebody go who's not working right now to hold space for a better partner, so be it. You guys will have to let me know what happens. Obviously, that's a very rare and unusual transit, especially if you have later degree Virgo. Saturn is opposing you. So it definitely feels like you've been tested, but it will begin to ease up in the new year. Let me know what happens. Libra risings. You guys are going to have Saturn retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. It will be moving through your natal 6th house, which we know deals with your health, your routines, your pets, your diet. It's also connecting to your workspace. And it's in a sign that in conjuncts or quincunxes you. So Libra, you also don't always see some of the changes as they're kind of coming, somewhat similar to Leo. This basically means that we're taking Saturn, which rules your home and kind of private life and your family, as well as your 5th house, which is about creativity, children, anything kind of connected to your happiness, and it's retrograding in the 6th. So you're going to feel like your health routines are a little restricted. Some of you guys might find that you're going back to the doctor, you're going back to the gym, you're revising something about your work schedule or your workflow, And this is also about kind of karmic work habits that are now resurfacing. I think for many of you guys, this is going to be wellness revisions and like structured healing. And if you guys are really prioritizing your self-care and you're releasing this tendency to kind of feel like things have to be perfect, then it's going to get a little bit easier. But for others, it could also mean that this is a time of just work, and like service and kind of giving to other people, whether it's taking care of pets, taking care of kids, taking care of family, or just the, day in, day out stuff that you have to do at home and at work for, your to-do list. It's definitely going to feel like it's things that you need to kind of wrap up and complete. Now, Libra, you've had Saturn, which has been in your opposite sign. So, likely you've seen some issues that have been arising in certain relationships as a result of not taking care of your sixth house stuff. And the sixth house is where we kind of get everything in order so we can meet others. So if you want time to be dating, to be in relationships, to also, I think, better certain existing relationships, there's a need for you to have like a better structured kind of schedule. And I do think for many of you guys, this is a time that I would be keeping an eye on my health. And having Pisces in the sixth house is kind of wonky because it means you don't always see some of the work changes or the health changes as it's coming. And this is about integrating more kind of mind, body, spirit balance, where it's not just about work and routine and habits. It's also about your sleep. It's about your emotional health. It's about your mental health. And how you're kind of structuring your schedule. So there can be some changes that are going on there, and obviously opportunities to heal. Good luck, Libra. We have got Scorpio rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. This will be taking place in your natal 5th house. And if you're a later degree Scorpio, like the last 7 degrees or so, Saturn will be trining some of your placements. So this is actually pretty beneficial for Scorpio. I think it's going to be much easier than having had Saturn in Aries recently. And Saturn rules your 3rd house of communication, the mind, anything to do with like media, siblings, and learning. And it also is connected to your 4th house, which deals with your home as well as your family. That could be who you live with. That could be, family responsibilities. It could also be things revolving around moving or movement. And your extended family as well. Now, Saturn's going to retrograde back into the 5th, which is the area of the chart that deals with creativity. It's also about romance kind of getting tested, finding your own personal joy and happiness, and also like making more time for hobbies, self-expression, and children. So there could definitely be tests coming under the realm of, well, is this making you happy? Or do you want to create this thing? Do you want to date this person? Do you love this thing? And some challenges that can kind of come with kids as well. So I think that the positive is that even though these topics get tested, Saturn is here to kind of help you talk about it. It's here to help you plan it. It's here to help you ground and create the space in your home life to be able to do more of these things. Now, I do predict for my Scorpio risings that there can be joyful closures, like completing, personal projects or businesses. It could mean that there is going to be a huge turning point for one of your children that are getting older and they're going through some big life changes and they're growing up. It could also mean that there could be much more mature expressions in relationships that can kind of come and emerge throughout this period for you as well. Remember that Saturn, when he leaves the house, he leaves a gift. So whether it's going to be a true love, if it's going to be a thriving personal business, if it's going to be, a new instrument that you play, or potentially even finally starting a family, some of these transits are definitely going to bring you what you want after you kind of believe in yourself and also really focus on what's going to bring you joy. So I would recommend for my Scorpio and Scorpio risings to really channel this, into something artistic or creative. You're going to find that you're very intuitive. It is a time to believe that you can find joy and happiness or love. And it's a really good time to be kind of nurturing the inner child here, because I feel like that's very important as well. Hope you enjoy that grand water trine that you're going to have to Jupiter also. I think a lot of you guys are going to travel. You're going to have new relationships. You're going to have opportunities to kind of expand when it comes to maybe where you're living or, traveling, kind of making way for new romantic connections. Good luck. All right, we got Sag and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? Saturn's retrograding back into Pisces in your natal 4th house. So if you happen to have any Sagittarius placements, 23 to 29 degrees, you're experiencing a square to Saturn. So you're under a rare and unusual Saturn square. Truth be told, not an easy place to have Saturn. Saturn moving through the 4th house can feel a little emotionally heavy, a little landlocked. And Saturn is traditionally associated with your second house of money and values and, kind of, financial security and your self-esteem, as well as your third house, which is going to deal with communication, siblings, learning, and short distance trips. So Saturn retrograde back into the fourth house is having you kind of reevaluate or revise where Saturn has been going for the better part of the last 2 years. So home and family karma, renovating houses, planning moves, taking care of parents, domestic kind of responsibilities, and your emotional foundations are all going to be reviewed. And that could be how much money you're spending on a house. That could mean what you're saving to be able to move. That could mean going back home and being with parents, karmic, conversations with siblings that could be kind of going on and trying to figure out, am I staying or am I going? What am I doing? And I think that I would predict for many of you guys that, there is opportunity here for ancestral healing, for finally kind of wrapping up some emotional stuff that can be going on with family. And you'll be able to kind of secure roots after the eclipses and maybe after Saturn starts to leave, and then you'll have a much more structured or kind of secure place to call home. I do think that it can be difficult, obviously, with the squares and, Sag, you're the sign that's kind of getting hit. Most likely in comparison to Virgo and Pisces, possibly just as hard because you've got Sagittarius, Virgo eclipses, Uranus in your opposite sign, and then Pisces eclipses and Saturn here. So, you've been through this earlier this year, whatever, challenge or emotional kind of hardship you've been going through. Now you're just going to be reviewing it as you're preparing to kind of move on from this phase next year. Saturn's going to be going into Aries. So for a lot of you guys, it's like, well, am I moving in with a partner? Am I having a kid? Am I choosing to stay home and, be a stay-at-home parent? Am I relocating? A lot of that is kind of the theme that I've seen for Sagittarius risings. I would say as a tip, family dialogues and really building inner trust and security, I think is going to be a huge theme. And also like building nurturing spaces at home is definitely the focus. And keep an eye with stuff that can break down at home. So with like Saturn retrograde, washer and dryers can break down. You can also see issues in the kitchen, problems with sinks, problems with plumbing, foundation repairs, and obviously storms that can impact your home. So keep an eye on that, okay? Good luck, Sag. All right, we got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. And obviously the next three are very personally impacted by this transit because either Saturn's in your sign or Saturn is your ruler. So Capricorn rising, obviously Saturn is your chart ruler. It rules your first house of self. That's your body, your appearance, and your identity. And your second house of money, resources, values, and self-esteem. Now, Saturn is retrograding out of Aries back into Pisces. So the good thing is if you're a late Capricorn rising, it's going to sextile you. So it's going to help you with communication, moving, learning, like it'll be easier to navigate. Granted, Saturn is still going to be really close to Neptune. So you're still feeling those effects, but at least it's out of Aries where I think that's not only not an easy place to have it because that's a sign where sometimes we lack confidence, but it's been squaring you and it's been in an angular house. So you got like a little bit of like a sneak preview of what 2026 looks like in terms of figuring out what your home and your foundation will eventually look like. Until then, I think the Saturn retrograde in your third is all about your mindset, working through where there's been some restricted communication, maybe some issues with siblings, maybe you've had a car breakdown, or there's been some delays in planning on where you're going to move or where you're going to be living. And this is about karmic thoughts resurfacing and trying to kind of like think or communicate more clearly about what you need when it comes to your home and your living situation. Seen a lot of Capricorn risings personally that have been kind of traveling around figuring out where they want to land, or maybe they've gone back home because they're going back to school. That could be another manifestation of this. I would just say for you guys, I predict that there can be clear ideas after the illusions have dissolved. So as we're getting into like the fall when, Saturn goes direct, you're going to be able to think more clearly, communicate, know where you're going to be landing, and maybe you're just going to kind of trust your intuition a little bit better. I would like to see Capricorn risings, journaling about where they have been experiencing limitations and what they believe they can overcome. And also have affirmations and be speaking with intention for growth, because I think that a lot of this is about personal empowerment with where you're kind of going forward, and just keeping that dialogue open, because it's really going to help you when it comes to making some big decisions about what you think, your relationship with family, as well as ultimately where you may be traveling to or where you may be living. Okay? Good luck, Capricorn. All right, Aquarius and Aquarius risings, what's going on? Saturn's retrograding back into Pisces in your natal second house of personal possessions, money, and resources, values, security, all that stuff. So Saturn is your traditional ruler, so it is connected to you. It's also connected to your 12th house, which is like what's hidden and subconscious. So I've foreseen for a lot of for a lot of for a lot of Aquarius and Aquarius risings, you guys have been really reevaluating like a direction that you're going to be taking when it comes to a financial matter. Some of you guys have been contemplating switching careers or going back to school. And, some of you guys have been waiting for some financial breakthroughs or for some kind of payoff or for some kind of lump sum to come in. And you've been really working through any hidden fears that you have about money, security, and self-worth. So for many of you guys, I think that, you're going to see that there can be a little bit of like a tightening of the purse strings or a reevaluation of your budget, or maybe you're feeling like there is a little bit of like some tightness with some money for the next couple of months. But this is about working through karmic worth issues. And I think Saturn in the second house, especially in Pisces, is very much like less is more and having like a minimalist mindset. If you're not worrying about money, if you're not super focused on money, the money will flow while Saturn is retrograde. And I do think for many of you guys, this is about financial completions or, intuitive abundance post-review. So once Saturn goes direct in the fall, it'll be a little bit easier to reevaluate your financial situation or what you've been manifesting becoming a little bit more real. And this is about really releasing any kind of spiritual attachment that you have to material possessions. Trusting your inner security, knowing your worth, not doubting yourself, not selling yourself short, and seeing where all of like the hard work that you've been putting into something is actually going to manifest into something tangible that is going to be supportive for you in the long run. Good luck. We got Pisces and Pisces risings. What's going on, Pisces? Saturn is retrograding back into your sign, so you get a bit of a review and kind of putting the final touches on the Saturn transit that you have had for the last couple of years. In the first house is the house of self, body, personal boundaries, and also your goals. And Saturn rules your 11th house of goals, friends, and networks, and your 11th house of self-sabotage, things that are kind of unseen and behind the scenes. So as Saturn is retrograding back into your first house, first things first is this is all about your self-identity. And you may feel like in some ways you're a little bit more restricted. In other ways, you might feel like this is a part of like karmic personal lessons, and what you are actually kind of releasing or what's being held back from you is actually going to be good for you in the long term. So it's definitely a test of like your own personal goals, and it's showing you where sometimes there could be issues where you're your own worst enemy, where you're isolating yourself or you're limiting yourself or you're really hard on yourself. And it's also going to be really showing you how deeply devoted and committed you are to some of your friends, your goals, and your networks. So positive is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger with this transit. I think especially with Neptune retrograde, I think some of you guys are going to feel like you're kind of like lost at sea for the next couple of months, or you're really deep in your emotions, or you need a lot of personal space. And I think you're going to see a lot of that that's going to be coming through the eclipses as well, as you see a solar eclipse that's going to be in your 7th house that will oppose you. So it's going to show you where maybe you really need other people and you're bringing in karmic connections, or you really need other people and you're feeling like they're kind of failing to show up, and you're like, okay, this is really pushing me to be stronger, to be more mature, or to kind of stand up for myself and do what I need to do outside of relationships. I think with Neptune being in the mix is interesting because obviously that's several months of continuing to go through this test of faith in yourself and belief in yourself. But the positive is that you're going to see that this is going to be trining Jupiter in your 5th house, which is your traditional ruler. So if you can withstand some of the personal challenges and I think upheaval, and if you're staying committed to what you love, what you want to nurture, what you want to grow, what makes you happy, then you will see this through. But you got to keep an eye on your health, your sleep, and also your mood can kind of be affected here. And I think really this is about destiny activations and really mature, a much more mature self after kind of surrendering to the current circumstances of what needs to change. So embracing solitude and really, structuring some of your intuitive time for personal empowerment and manifestation, I think is really going to be the key. Good luck. Especially when I hear from you guys what you think about Saturn going back into your sign. All right, guys. Well, that being said, that's the cosmic download on Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Obviously, it's a time for profound closure and growth. Remember that the next couple of months is a time really to be building towards some of the bigger shifts that we're going to see in 2026. So if this resonated with you, please give me a thumbs up, like this video, consider sharing with other astro friends. Also, subscribe to the channel below and leave me a comment and let me know where is Saturn retrograde in your chart right now. Are you a Pisces placement? Are you mutable placement? Are you feeling it? What lessons have you learned so far with Saturn in Pisces? I think now's a good time to kind of reflect on that, and we can all kind of give each other some much needed kind of confidence when it comes to reviewing some of these topics. And I'd love to hear more from you guys. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. I'm going to be doing live tarot readings on the channel, 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time, and you can see me here 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. I'll see you guys there to get your cards read. And until next time, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.